now we got Enid. She was a character who kind of early on had a few compelling episodes where she was surviving on her own, and the JSS tattoo just survived somehow. Was very emotionally compelling story. Her and Carl, the relationship they tried to play off with them, it just didn't come off right. There's just something about it that didn't work for whatever reason. I don't know if that was Chandler Riggs acting or the script. It's hard to say what didn't really work there. But unfortunately, Enid was a character that they kept around and they never really got her to work. I mean, the actress is good. It's just, I don't know. For some reason, it's just like Tara's another one. We're gonna come back to her, but they ironically get killed off in the same way, right? But yeah, I mean, I liked her being a medic and everything towards the end, but she was just never one of my favorite characters, and I got to put her in the D tier. It's not like I dislike her. It's just Eugene, I think, is a great character in both the comic and the show, and they aren't really that different, except in the show, they take away some of Eugene's accomplishments, which is kind of unfortunate. In the show, they have this character that gives them the blueprints for building a windmill. In the comic series, he figures out how to do it on his own. Eugene is smart enough to figure that out. Eugene gets the trains running again, which I don't think he does that in the show either. But other than that, it's the same character portrayed perfectly, and some really colorful dialogue, and every line that is a Eugene line, who's saying it. If you just read it on the screen, who's saying that. It's very recognizable. Every Eugene line, and he's a funny anecdote is they did this Walking Dead VR game, AMC did. It wasn't very good, but they had Eugene voiceovers in it during the missions, and that just made the game like a million times better, even though the game still sucks, right? But that's just a sidetrack. I gotta put Eugene in the S tier. I really like Eugene. He's always there to provide the not comic relief, well, comic relief as well, but just my writer instincts just love the dialogue that he gives. So Father Gabriel, I think, is a character that they improved from the comic series. His introduction was the same. The priest who was a coward, who wouldn't let people in the church that needed help. Now, I think that's a character that makes a lot of sense in The Walking Dead. A character who's supposed to be a moral leader, who doesn't have the courage to really succeed in that. And then he goes from the coward to the brave person. And in the comic, he dies in the Whisperer War in a brave way. In the show, he doesn't die, but he's able to go full circle and go from locking people out of his church to unlocking a door and letting people in to help them. So really love this character, and they took him a little too far at one point where he was losing his faith and he was way too aggressive. He was very violent when I would have preferred him to be a bit more moral, more of that Dale style. I get making him a little edgier, and you have to, in this world, accept a bit more of the violence going into it, but I liked where he ended up, which is back with his faith. He's hearing God's voice again, and he is trying to be that moral leader who doesn't want to have conflict in the world. So I really like Gabriel, and the actor who played him, I think, did an amazing job. He's got to go. I think he's going to, maybe I think he's B tier just because they almost took him too far. They brought him back, like I said, and he's evolved into an A tier character. But in terms of overall, I got him dock him 1 tier just for that part where they took him a little too far in season 9 and 10, I believe. So here we got Gareth. This is, of course, the Terminus Cannibals in season 5, one of my favorite arcs on the show, and just one of the most compelling villains that they had. It's a short arc, but it stands out in my memory as one of the best that they ever did. So, I gotta give them the A tier. I would give them S tier, but there's not quite enough complexity and all that. But I really like that arc of the show, and I think of it fondly. So next we got of course, Glenn, one of everybody's favorites. And you guys already, do we even need to argue about what tier Glenn goes in? Come on. There's nothing really to criticize. I mean, I think he's a similar character, but I think seeing him portrayed by Stephen Young and like such he has such a big heart, and you can just see all of the emotions on his face, and he's just one of the standout characters that you really connect with. He's a smart guy, and I love his. They did add some complexity to him with his relationship with Maggie, where at the farm she's seeing things about him that he doesn't even know about himself. You know, how he's a leader and how he's brave and how he lets people step over him. I mean, it's a character arc that's extremely relatable, and even if you're not a person who's like Glenn, you want to be like Glenn. He's a guy that we want to be like. You know, he's a guy that we want to be around, we want to hang out with, and he's a guy that you want to emulate. And he keeps a positivity and optimism, and he has a moral character. He has heart. He has reason. He's sensible. There's no you. I like everything about Glenn. There's nothing to dislike about Glenn. You know what I'm saying? But here's somebody who's something that you can dislike. Gregory, of course, is the guy who sold out his group to Negan. He was a coward, and he ends up getting hanged. I corrected myself. Hanged by Maggie in season 9, very dramatically, when he betrays her. So amazing character. You know, as much as you love to hate him, you gotta remember the love part. You love to hate this guy. So you know, I gotta put him in the B tier just because like he's a very compelling, cowardly piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like B tier, he's a great character. Next we got Herschel, which is another character I think was improved from the comic series. Now he kind of takes on a bit more of the moral role and the wisdom role from Dale. I feel like he kind of inherited that in season 3, and even when he's introduced, he always has, you know, Bible verse to quote or something clever, right? So he's a very vital character, and obviously his portrayal was just like such a compelling character on screen, and somebody you want him to be your grandpa, right? You want to hear wisdom from him. And I love the journey that he goes on where, you know, he realizes that he was wrong about the zombies and all of that. And it's just a character who is, he has convictions, but he believes in morality of the right and wrong. I think it's really important to depict somebody in the show who believes in God and stuff, because the show's all about kind of a crisis of faith. So you have to have a person of faith on the show to represent that. And I think Herschel does that with so much dignity, and he's a very likable character, and even if you don't agree with him, he's a character that we all recognize the good in him. So you know, in a way we all kind of want to resemble him, you know. So I think he's a very powerful character, and I love, you know, his past, how he was a drinker at one point. You know, he has flaws, but he knows how to channel it in his old age into wisdom. So I really love that character, and when he comes back in Rick's final episode, it's one of my favorite scenes in the last few seasons of the show. You know, and I think that was his last performance ever, the actor. So really amazing character, and an improvement from the comic version. The comic version was a lot more bitter. He's compelling as a character dramatically, but he just didn't have that same warmth to him, that same, you know, I don't love Herschel in the comic in the same way. Next we got Jerry, who's a fantastic sidekick character that never really got any plot lines of his own, you know. So I loved having him around, comic relief character, and then they kind of evolved him out of that, so that the pressure wasn't on that he's always got to be spitting jokes at every 2 seconds like a Marvel movie. But I would say he never carried his own storyline, so he was always a kind of an accessory character, so that's why he wouldn't go up to that top tier. But I really like the character. I'm just struggling. Is he A tier or B tier? I think he's B tier, just because he never really had a storyline of his own. He doesn't really have an arc per se. You know, he's just always Jerry, right? But we love Jerry, and I hope he comes back in a spinoff too, you know? So here we got Jesse, Now, this is definitely she's a good character, but I got to put her in the C tier because I never really cared about her that much. She's a stopgap between Lori and Michonne for Rick, and that's all that really matters. But very dramatically important when it comes to the Alexandria arc and how her husband was abusive and Rick standing up to him and all that conflict. And then, of course, the Horde moment where she and her son are devoured. Definitely very compelling, dramatic character. So, she's an important character, but, not by any means one of my favorites. And we're going to pull her in again because for some reason it's not working. And we're just going to put her in this C tier. And then we're going to move on. So, yeah, I don't hate the character. I don't know. Seeing Enid down there, it makes me feel bad that Enid's all the way down there by herself. Next, we got Judith, who's huge, apparently. Judith is a character that her best days are to come, I think. I think she's going to have her own spinoff. And, the original ending that they filmed for the final episode that featured Judith all grown up. It's obvious that that's why they kept her alive. And what they hope to do with her next, she's the legacy character for Rick Grimes, and I think they're hoping that she could carry the franchise forward into the future. But really, her character is more of a figurehead legacy character than anything. I don't know that at this moment she has any depth. Like, I like the character. I like how she has a relationship with Negan. I like how she's brave, and I like how, she talks to Daryl and stuff like that. But if anything, I almost think she's a little bit too good at everything. She needed to be taken down a peg, and they did that slightly. But I think she had a bit too much confidence so that the arc doesn't have anywhere to go. So I like the character, and they got a very talented young actress to portray the character, of course. But, as of right now, she's got to go in the B tier, man. She's got to go in the B tier because, I think they made her, like, she missed her mom a little bit, but she was a bit too stoic about it. She had her friend who was a little kid, and she's given the other kid all this wisdom. And it's like, shouldn't you be feeling all, like, intensely all these, oh, I feel sad about my mom sometimes, but I learned how to deal with it. It's like, you're a kid. Come on. What do you mean you learned how to deal with it? Anyways, I'm getting a little distracted. Moving on, we talked about Connie already. Kelly is her sister. And now, similar to Judith, like what I was just saying, they made her way too wise. Like, her sister goes missing, and she doesn't seem to care. I mean, it doesn't seem realistic to me that she's, like, comforting Carol in the scene where they're crying. And, the people behind the scenes, they talked about that scene like it was this amazing thing. And to me, it just felt, like, out of character, out of place. I don't feel like somebody who just lost their sister would be that composed. And it's a rare person who's like that. So, I don't know. And if anything, she's playing second fiddle with Connie. Not that that's anything bad about the actress. The actress does a great job. But I gotta say, the fact that she, had that fake wisdom and everything, she's got to go in C tier. You know what I mean? Like, she's not a bad character. But, I said what I had to say. So, moving on, we got King Ezekiel. Now, of course, Ezekiel is one of the coolest characters, just the whole concept of the kingdom and having a tiger, being a zookeeper, just this gregarious guy with, again, a lot of warmth, except he also has strength that comes with that as well. I like his arc from losing his community, having that low point, and his relationship with Carol, and how he comes out the other side. He eventually becomes the governor. He takes over for Milton, so I like that final arc. And he didn't get killed off like in the comics, so that's cool. And, I feel like we haven't seen the last of King Ezekiel. But, he's not like one of my personal very, very favorites, but he's definitely in the A tier. There's no question about it. Next, we got Lance. This was a late addition to the show. Of course, he's only in the last season. And I think he was one of the best additions to the Commonwealth arc. He was very different from the comic counterpart. And they kind of made him the dastardly villain. Of course, in his own mind, he's doing the right thing, but he's the most interesting, compelling villain in the final season, and even he even stands shoulder to shoulder with, like the Gareth from Terminus. I think he's one of the great Walking Dead villains. So I gotta put him maybe in the A tier, guys. Maybe it's just recency bias because it's the most recent season I've seen, but he elevated that season so much. Like, without his character, man, it might have, I had my criticisms early on, but it might, even that final Commonwealth arc might not have landed as well. Here we got a character. This is probably the first and only. I don't know. I haven't looked through the rest of the list. F tier. I don't even need to think about it. Always hated this character from the very beginning. Daryl getting a random girlfriend after, people who care about Daryl are like, is he going to get with Connie? Is he going to get with Carol? People have been wanting that for so long. And Daryl's a guy that we love. We want him to be happy, right? Then we give him this girlfriend storyline about somebody we don't care about, and they're arguing the whole time, and then she leaves, and then it's a very predictable ho-hum story. Her backstory makes no sense. She's like, oh yeah, the Reapers are my family, but I also ran away from them, and had to, and there was an altercation when they brought me back in. So it's like she fought them because she didn't want to go back, but they're her family, and she cares about. Dumb. Hate the character. No, I don't. I'm not even gonna waste any more time talking about it. Next, we got Lori. Now, here is one. A lot of people didn't like Lori. I don't get it. In the comic series, I can see not liking Lori as much because she blames Rick for a lot more things. In the show, I'm rewatching it right now. Almost every argument, I find myself like siding with Lori. I feel like she did the right thing. She stand by her husband. I know, like, people are like, oh, she cheated on him. She thought he was dead. It's a different situation. And when he came back, she was loyal to him. She turned Shane away right away. I love Lori, man. I respect Lori, and I think she was very sensible. She's a good person. I like Lori, so I don't like all the Lori hate. I really don't. So I don't know. I think I'm putting her in A tier, just out of respect. Put her in the A tier, and just remember season 3. Early on, when she died, that was like one of the biggest moments on the show yet. Like, that was perhaps the most emotional outburst from Rick, perhaps ever. So big character. Don't talk shit on Lori, right? Next, we got Lydia. Lydia, I think it's interesting how she's different from her comic counterpart. I liked her comic counterpart a lot. She was definitely a big old wrench thrown into everything, like how she reacted to Carl and the eye lick moment. If you see the comic, that's one of the most shocking moments. I think they made a character with a bit more complexity. Again, I mean, that's a recurring theme that I've been saying over and over again, is they took a simple character and added complexity. I think that's what they did with Lydia as well, and the fact that Carl wasn't on the show anymore. They gave the romance storyline to Henry, except he ended up getting killed off, which means, how does she exist in the world without Henry there? How does she adapt to this society that hates her because of who her mother was? And I like who she grew into in the final season, and I think really talented actress as well. You see that in the scene where her arm gets cut off in the final season, right? So I really like Lydia, but not top tier Walking Dead character. She's going in the B tier, but it's a solid B tier. She's a great character. Next, we got Maggie, and Maggie is, of course, without question, either A tier or S tier, depending on your personal preference and how much you personally relate to her. I think it's very obvious that the Glenn and Maggie connection is one of the standout parts of the early portion of the show. And it represents the heart of The Walking Dead, and I really love her journey up until when she leaves the show kind of unceremoniously, right? I love her struggling with the loss of her husband and then becoming a leader, and then she abandons the group that she's a leader of. So I didn't really care for how they wrote her off, and then she came back in a way that didn't make sense, with people that all got killed off. very quickly, except for Elijah. And let's be honest, who cares about Elijah, right? So I gotta say that her leaving the show, and I understand the business decision. She wanted to try to star in a TV show. Definitely understand doing that. I'm not criticizing the actress for doing that, but I'm gonna knock her down from S tier to A tier just because I didn't like how she was written off in kind of a sloppy way, and written back in a sloppy way as well. So that's just my opinion on it.